think we're pretty close to 11, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us today for the spring bulb class. Go bold with bulbs. You can see some nice pictures on there of springtime. Today's feeling a little more like fall, but spring will be right around the corner. I am Trevor Cameron, as you can see, our general manager here at Sunnyside. Nicole is our director of marketing. She's in the background there. You can wave hi. She's got a pretty green screen now, so now you don't have to look at our office anymore. It looks like she's sitting out in the garden somewhere. So thanks again for joining us. I hope everybody had a chance to grab the list. It's about 3 pages. We kind of morphed my info sheet together with a little quick class outline. It's available on the website, or certainly email us after the class. I'd be happy to run in and send you a copy via email too, but it's very easy to find on the class sheet as well. Before we kind of get going with some slides, I just wanted to show you maybe a couple things. If you were coming down here to Sunnyside to look for a shop for some bulbs, so here's the typical bulb package. You know, I can see what I'm buying here. Ooh, look at the little daffodils already starting to sprout. This package will have everything you need to know on it. I've got the colors of the mix. This is a mix. I can read on the text right here. Narcissus or daffodils are deer and critter resistant. It's going to give me the bloom time, approximate heights. On the back of the package here on the top, it's going to tell me how tall, again, the bulb is going to be out of the ground, how deep I plant it, what's the preferred depth, and also spacing. You know, none of us probably ever go by, can I have a daffodil, and I'll go put it in my yard. You know, what's one daffodil going to do? We want to make a presentation, you know, mass planting. So when you're buying packages, this one's got 20 of them in there. I'm going to have a nice presence in the landscape when I plant these. So this will give me spacing, allow them to develop and naturalize in my garden. So as you're looking at the packages, pay attention to each one will give you all the information you need on there. Okay. We're going to look at some slides here, go through some general information, and then I'll show you kind of some of the classifications of bulbs. We'll start here. Bulb basics. You know, it's always kind of funny. We stay a season ahead. You know, I can't tell you the number of people that call down to me or our staff here at Sunnyside and ask for tulip bulbs in the spring. And yes, you can buy them grown, packaged, already blooming, 10 times the cost of coming in and buying them bulk in packages. So much less expensive. And we would always plant now in the fall for spring bloom. Daffodils, tulips, crocus, anything you've enjoyed on your yard or seen around landscapes that blooms coming out of winter, you would purchase right now and get in the ground. One tip I would always say is watch drainage. You know, we've got a lot of wet here in the wintertime. We want to make sure that we've got adequate drainage for our bulbs. If not, they will tend to rot and struggle a little bit. I don't need 2 feet, you know, of fresh soil to grow them in. But I would guess in most yards, if you had a foot to 18 inches of well-drained soil, that's going to be plenty to allow the bulbs to grow well, develop a nice root system, and give you long-term success year after year after year. You know, size matters. You know, I put that on there because, you know, every store has bulbs. I was at the grocery store last night, and there's QFC with some packaged bulbs sitting in the corner. Sometimes they look a little less expensive. Costco carries them, a lot of other stores. I wouldn't tell you, you know, you have to buy them at Sunnyside, but really pay attention to the size. You know, we try to buy a premium size or grade bulb in that's going to give me multiple flowers right away. The smaller the bulb, the less chance you have it blooming that first year. You know, and let's be honest, I'm planting bulbs right now because I want to see some flowers in spring. You know, I don't want to wait a whole nother season until 2022 before I get to enjoy some color. So pay attention to the size. Look a lot of times at blends. You know, I brought this package out. This is a mixture of early Narcissus. We have tulip blends, a lot of nice color combinations, even some tulips with daffodils. You know, if you just want to start easy and have a really nice presentation in a certain season in spring, early, mid, or late, look at some of the package collections. They're very easy to grow. You can kind of show your own style, pick your own color. Easy way to go, you know, if you just want to start away. Pay attention to heights. You know, I put that on there just to warn people. You know, sometimes we get a little windy, you know, off and on here through the winter and spring as they're growing. You know, I don't want a really tall, 2-foot tall daffodil or tulip sitting out where maybe it's going to be a little more exposed to the wind. I have a greater chance of breaking the stems off here come springtime as they're blooming. And again, I don't want to hide, other plants I might have in the yard. So there is short, medium, and tall varieties on almost all the bulbs we'll talk about today. I can find the appropriate height that you want to use in your landscape. Check your depth. Like I mentioned on the package, it's going to tell you how far to go down. I really like my little bulb planter. If you can see that right there, you can see I can squeeze the handle, let soil go, shove it into the ground, pick up soil, let it go. I love these because they're right on the side. I've got my measurements, so I don't have to sit being OCD with the tape measure for days and space everything out, although I will admit I usually do that when I plant bulbs. But if you want to make it easy, a little bulb planter will really help you get into the ground and measure the depths for you as well. Space them properly, like I mentioned. If you're going for one season and you want a massive amount, to cut and bring inside or whatever, I've seen some people, and I've done it a few times in my day, just dig a big hole, dump a package of 30 tulips in there and cover it up and walk away. I mean, they will grow, but that's for us season. I go back, I harvest my bloom, do whatever I want. If I'm looking for this to last in my landscape, I really want to give those little guys some room to develop, space them out a little bit properly so they've got room to grow, get larger, multiply, and I've got more and more flower each season as we go forward. Use multiple varieties, is an easy way. I'm going to move my mouse here. To extend the blooming season. That's a point. As you look at these packages, we'll have daffodils that will bloom early spring, mid-spring, late spring, and that will go for a lot of the tulips as well. So I can mix things and have color out essentially even by mid-January. In my own yard I do, through February into March into April, and alliums a lot of time will get me into that mid-late May and early June time frame. So I can extend this bloom cycle literally out 5 or 6 months by picking the right varieties. As you can see in that original picture that we showed, try to mass things together. I mentioned earlier, planting 1 or 3 certainly will give you a little bit of color. But if you're looking to make an impact, and I think what most people see in magazines and on websites and around is, I want a swath of bulbs. I want a big chunk, 20 or 30 of a kind, or even more sometimes in larger gardens, because that's going to make a nice spring presentation. Okay. Last thing I'll say, is kind of let the bulb tell you when it's done for the year. One of the common mistakes I see when you're growing bulbs is you're rushed to cut off the foliage after they flower. If I'm the little bulbous creature and I've sent my flower up, I've got the green leaves still on there after bloom so that I can store energy into my bulb for next year's season. So you can't just run out, maybe no tete-a-tats or some of the certain daffodils that bloom early. I have them, a lot of them on my own landscape, and it's tempting to walk out and say, I'm kind of done with you. You're done blooming. Let me chop you off of the ground, throw some mulch down, and I don't have to see you till next year. If I do that too early, I will not give them a chance to store energy and be ready to go for the next season for flower. So let them turn yellow, brown on their own. Once that happens, typically with most of our spring stuff, they're done by later May, early June. I can go ahead and clean up the rest of the foliage and I'm done, done for the year. And I'll see you again next spring when they come out. Okay. I'll show you, just as I showed you my little bulb planter, just a couple of tools. One thing that I found really easy, especially if you've got an established landscape, I brought one in here. I've got this auger bit. Hopefully you can see it. This is something I can literally put into my power drill or cordless drill and drill into the soil to make bulb planting very, very easy. I think this is a great tool that most people don't know about, that will save you a lot of time. And my yard's been over 20 years old now, and if I want to add more bulbs underneath one of my Japanese maples or new area, it's going to take me some time to cut through some of the roots in here and try to find a good location. That auger goes right through and makes it very, very easy to drill a bunch of holes, drop them in there, and then I'm done. Dig, drop, done is a great way to go. Long-handled hand tools, you'll see maybe a little easier on the back, and then I tend to use, again, a little short one in loose soil when I'm doing containers or different type situations. That's a useful one as well. Try to go green, as we get kind of into the plant classes, and you'll see again joining us hopefully in 2021. I'm always kind of preaching a little bit about trying to use natural products. We don't have to get something murder, death, kill, systemic to take care of a lot of problems with bulbs. There's some very easy things that we can do to keep our bulbs healthy and do it the natural or organic way. So always try to use natural care products and organic fertilizer. You'll see here some pictures coming up. I'll show you some organic products. It's always the best way to go, go green. So potting soil, I'll be planting up a container here in just a couple moments. And this is what I've used. Edna's Best Potting Soil from EB Stone. That's our standard, great, organic, well-drained potting soil. Has got everything you could ever need in it. Works great for container planting, which is what we'll be doing here in a second. Compost, again from EB Stone, all organic. If I'm planting in my yard, this is what I want to do. If I've got a swath in my landscape I want to add a couple packages of bulbs to for some spring color, I'm going to dig up that area or use my bulb planter, drop some compost in, mix it up, add some fertilizer, which I'll show you here in a second, and then off we go. And this makes great mulch as well. So usually when I'm done, I typically will mulch that whole area that I planted with bulbs with at least a good 2 inches of the EB Stone compost. It's easier for me to go back and see where I just planted brand new ones so I don't accidentally dig them up this winter. Sometimes I'll even put little stakes around it too to mark the area. There's your 2 stock bulb fertilizers. So bulb food from EB Stone or bone meal, which is just pure phosphorus. That's really all bulbs need. We don't need a whole lot of nitrogen, just a little bit for the foliage. We're looking for flower power. So whether I use the bulb food, which has got a lot of bone meal in it, or I go straight to bone meal, I don't have a problem either way. Certainly if you have, if you're familiar with our brands, the EB Stone, the pink bag, the rose and flower food works just as well too for a little kick for the bulbs. But if you're going to do something specific, these 2 products are probably at the top of the list. If you're feeding and we go through the seasons, when I plant them, I want to feed them right now in the fall. If you really want them to develop size, get larger, multiply, we would feed these one more time coming out of winter, kind of as they're coming up and starting to do their thing. The rest of the year, I can walk away. I just want to do those nice gentle feedings as they're coming up with organics, and then I can get larger, multiply my bulb, and then have a little more flower season to season to season. There, have you see that guy Wanted the Squirrel? Used to have a slide that he had a straight jacket on in 9 neighborhoods. He was wanted for grand larceny, theft, and movement of bulbs of all kinds. I don't have a magic answer for you on how to get Mr. Squirrel. I have them all over my yard, and I like watching the squirrels run around. But it is sometimes a little infuriating when you're a little OCD like me and you plant 100 crocus underneath something, and then you come back in spring, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, what's that one doing over there against the road? So they will move some things for you. Whether you like it or not. There's certain things they won't touch as well. Typically daffodils or narcissus are going to be the most critter resistant bulbs you can plant. I don't think I've ever had squirrel. Deer don't nibble on them. It's a very easy way to go. The tulips, the crocus, other things, yes, I will be honest, they may borrow them and move them to another spot to try to come back and find them later. So if you want and you struggle with maybe these, and the battle's on, you're not going to lose. Again, we're not looking to maim or dislocate any squirrels from our yard. We're just looking to perhaps repel them somewhere else. So we carry repels all animal repellent from Bonide. Lasts even 30 days when it's rainy out. I would suggest if you've got a high traffic squirrel yard that perhaps when you're done with your planting, we sprinkle a little bit of that repels all there. And you're not going to hurt them. It's just going to irritate their nose, eyes, mouth, and hopefully they'll head to Mrs. Jones next door and borrow her bulbs instead. Okay. Just a couple things to watch for. In the packages, everything should be great and fresh and clean. I put a picture of Tulip Rot on there. There's certainly other issues bulbs may get. Not so much bugs usually, but disease, and it would be a storage or packaging issue. If you've got bad drainage, this is what's going to happen in your landscape. If we're sitting on clay or getting too wet, we probably will end up with some loss of tulips in particular. So something, again, if you want to make sure you're planting healthy bulbs or make sure your soil's okay, get a little bit of the natural copper fungicide. Serenade's an old brand. I should change my picture, but we would have the same idea, a biofungicide here that's all natural and organic, that we could even spray those bulbs down once, let them dry on a paper towel, and then I've got the shield up and I can go ahead and pop them in the ground and make sure I'm clean. So we're going to take a pause here. I'm going to jump behind myself, if that makes sense, and plant a little container. But I just put a couple pictures up here because I think most of us gardeners, I brought this up with the fall container class, we have way too many pots behind our house. I think that's a commonality between most people that garden. You can always find a cool little pot. It's like, wow, that's been empty. I could do something with it. You know, come down and plant some bulbs in it. Maybe you don't want to do it in the landscape. Doing a little bulb container is a fabulous way to go. I do a few every year at my house. You could even leave them sit behind the house, you know, for the winter. And then as they start to emerge in January and kind of get going for the year, you can bring it right up, put it on the porch, and have months of color, you know, depending on what you plant in them. So I'm going to hop up here right behind. I got a container here. We're going to do a little bit of planting. I think everybody, I'm going to stop the screen share here just 1 second. Okay, so now we're on the full video. So this is a pot from my house. If you like my pot, I love these. These are called Boiling Glaze. They got some really cool colors, and I think honestly a lot of times they look like little art pieces. So this is a good frost-proof pot. I've had it for years. We carry a lot of these around here, different colors and styles, of course. But all I've done, if I flip it up here and you can see in there, is I have just added, I filled this about halfway up with potting soil. I've looked at my bulb packages that I've chosen, and I've looked at the depth. The deepest thing that I'm going to plant in this for my own house is Allium. And Allium likes being down there maybe in the 6 to 8 inch deep range. So I'm down there where it's going to be appropriate. Now, I'm always going to start, maybe if we think about designing this, you know, again, what are your colors? You know, I tend to like probably the yellows, orange, and reds a little bit more. Other people may go the pink and the pastel colors. It's totally up to you. But I've selected some certain things I'll show you as we plant them so that I could have color coming up in January, February, March, and April. And then the Alliums are kind of my final hurrah. They get the tallest. And if you know Allium, I'm going to have the big purple globe flowers kind of at the height of the container. So if we start with that, you know, this is a nice little globe Allium called Purple Sensation. If I just take my package apart here, this is going to be the first thing I'm going to put in. This is just a bag of 5. I don't need a whole bunch of these. You know, if we kind of make this sense, if it was a plant, we would say leaves up, roots down. You know, look at your bulb on an Allium. If I bring this up close, I want to make sure those roots are going down and I've got my crown facing up. Make it easy for the little guy to grow. So again, being a self-proclaimed OCD guy, I am going to set 5 of these in a nice symmetric pattern here to get me started. Okay, just gently pressing them into the potting soil so they've got a little area to root. See, they might move if I tip this up, but I'll just show you. You know, that's all I've done. If you can see, are they moving? No, they're doing okay. So if you can see in there, oh, there they go. We'll try it, right? So if I've got those 5 in there, again, that's the last thing that's going to bloom. If I look at my package, it says 6 to 8 inches deep. I've got plenty of spacing in my container. I'm not going to put 50 of them in here. They're going to get crowded. But this is something that's going to give you my height. I would expect to be out of the soil about 18 to 24 inches when these little guys bloom. So this is my tallest, okay? So I put those in. I'm going to take just a little bit more potting soil and get myself into that 4 to 6 inch range, okay? Because that is where I want to have my tulips and my daffodils. So if I look here, I'm going to start with the tulip. I went with the red one. We were out of orange, so I had to settle for red. But I'm putting some red ones in. This is a package of 10. So I'm going to dump these little guys in my soil here. And then again, just space them around. I know the Alliums I had in that little circle down there with the spot in the middle. So I'm going to try to put some tulips nice and easy around the perimeter, and then leave myself maybe the last clump of 3 right in the center, right in between those alliums in the center. So now I've got, these will move if I pick it up. So use your imagination, right? So I've got 10 tulips in there ready to go, okay? Now I'm gonna dump just a little bit more soil. Not much, there's just a little tiny bit there to cover up my tulips. And I've chosen, you know, 2 different daffodils here, okay? I've got a large cup Narcissus, got a little orange for me, that's my color in the eye. And this will be a more of a mid-spring bloomer. And then I've chosen a little smaller Cyclamen type Narcissus, or jonquils are very close to this. This will give me a little bit of fragrance, but these will be down in that 6 to 12 inches tall. So I've got kind of 2 different heights going to give me a couple layers. So we're going to put the short ones in first. And I'm just going to, again, I want those growing tips up. My old roots are going down. And I'm just going to go through and intermix those where I have the tulips. I can still kind of feel where those tulips are down in my soil. And I can kind of get those in the gaps. I had plenty of room without being too crowded. So we're just gently pushing them down the soil a little bit. And I use those all the way around the perimeter. I haven't done anything in the middle. I kind of let those around the circumference of the pot because they're a little bit shorter. And then I'm going to take my larger, taller daffodils and I'm going to intermix those in the center. You can see these are much larger, so I can get those pushed down in there. So this is a great example of a lot of times when I see bulbs at the grocery stores, you know, that's twice as big as typically what you'd find, you know, at the Ace or whatever store you see bulbs at. These are going to bloom excellent the first year, and I don't have to wait a whole nother season, okay? So I've got a really nice chunk of those taller daffodils now right in the center, okay? So now I'm going to pour just a little bit more potting soil in here and cover all this up. I'm almost up to the rim. Sometimes I'll put some hyacinths in these too, but I got a lot of hyacinths in my yard, so I'm going to skip the hyacinth this year. And I just want a little bit of early flower power. So this is a beautiful orange crocus that I have a lot in my landscape called Orange Monarch. This is a little tiny short guy. These are only going to be up just about 2-3 inches out of the soil, and I only want those a couple inches into the soil. So these are easy because I'm just going to put a little bit. These are small, so be careful you don't lose them. So again, I'm going to pay attention. I can already see some foliage starting to come out on the package. I'm just going to pop a few of these around in a large container. Honestly, I probably could have got twice this many crocus. I'm just doing 10 here to kind of get it going. That's plenty. But I'm just intermixing a few of those around the edge and randomly a couple in the middle so that I've got, again, that'll be the first thing that comes up in January. I'll get home from work late January, I'll see the orange crocus as the daffodil and tulip foliage is coming up. Then I'm home the next month and I'll start to see my early daffodils blooming. The next month, the taller daffodils, the tulips are blooming. And then finally I get into May, I'll still have some nice foliage around there with the daffodils. Be looking sharp and the tulips, but now I'll have my big purple alliums going. So I've got a really nice pot that's going to give me a few months of flower power come springtime. So the last thing for me is I'm just going to get a little bit more potting soil in here so that I'm just an inch or two below the rim of the pot. I'm going to gently pack it down. I have to put this in my truck and take it home, so I am not going to water it in until I get home tonight. So the things you probably didn't see me do before I left this morning, I sprinkled some of my own bulb food down at the base in that potting soil. When I get home tonight, I don't think this will dump out, maybe. You can see it's pretty much filled with potting soil. But when I get home tonight, I will set this out where it sits for me to enjoy next spring, right at the end of my driveway. I will take one more rim of bulb food over the top of this, and then I'll take just an inch or so of compost, and I will mulch this whole pot. Now, if I was worried about Mr. Squirrel, he didn't touch it last year, but if I was worried about Mr. Squirrel borrowing my bulbs before they had a chance to grow, I would sprinkle a little bit of Repelzol on the soil surface as well and water it in. That should get me going here till fall. Hopefully he finds something at the neighbors to stash, right? So that's as simple as that. I mean, it's an easy way. Like I mentioned, if you've got a bunch of pots around the house, that's an easy way that you can make yourself a little spring container. Have some good flower power. So I'm going to go back to share the screen here. All right, there you go. Oh, maybe. So you can see those pots. I mean, again, if you want to know what's in the pots, you can see hyacinths there, daffodils, tulips. The one on the left, I think you're looking the same way I am, but the one on the left there would be kind of what I've done. You know, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that coming up, so I've got a nice sequence of color that tails me through the springtime. So if we get into some specific bulbs, I'll show you a few of the kind of the good spring favorites. Crocus, you can get whites, lavenders, purples, yellows. That's probably one of the first things to come up. I use a lot of crocus in mass. It's a great one to me if you like lace leaf maples, deciduous shrubs. We turn color here in the fall, we drop our leaves. You know, I want to come home before it leaves out. It's got all the sun in the world. So coming out of winter, I've got the sun to wake the bulbs up, to enjoy the flower without foliage hiding it. And to me, one of my favorite spots is a big lace leaf in my front yard. It must have 300 crocus underneath it. I get to see all the flowers. Then the maple leaves out and covers it all up, and I don't have to watch the crocus turn yellow later in spring. So if you find spots like that underneath old deciduous plants, they really can go anywhere as long as we've got good sun and good drainage on crocus. I should add orange to my slide because that orange one I planted is a little bit newer variety, the orange monarch, and I think that's one of the prettiest colors. That's a little more orange than other crocus. So there's your orange monarch. Hyacinth is a way to get fragrance. You know, the crocus are going to be in the landscape. I want color. Hyacinth, something I can grow because I want to smell it. It's a much bigger flower and it makes an awesome cut flower if you like to bring things in and smell up the house a little bit coming out late winter. Hyacinth up here, you know, typically is in bloom by Valentine's Day or pretty close to that point. So again, in the winter, they don't care about cold. Come in all kinds of colors. Very, very easy one to grow. I have a bunch of these right up my front planting bed of the front door, and I haven't seen them for 6 months, and I'll come home here probably by later November, December, and start to see the foliage coming out of the ground, and off we go for another season. So great one to think about is hyacinth. Erianthus is a bulb maybe not everybody's used. I'll credit Mr. Smith here, the whistling gardener, for getting me addicted to Erianthus about 10 years ago. We were out looking at his shade garden, and I'm like, what is that yellow thing you got blooming underneath there? I haven't tried those. And I got quite a few patches of them now because, again, when there's nothing going on in the garden late winter, this is a guy here I would expect to see color like mid-January. You know, coming home, seeing the really low, you know, just a couple inches tall. I've set these out underneath a lot of the bigger upright shrubs and maples in shady corners, and that's a really easy bulb to grow. That's got some great flower power. They call these winter aconites, or Erianthus. Fritillarias, you know, gardeners are always honest people, and I am too. I have not had the best luck growing Fritillarias. I'm going to be honest with you. I think this one's a little tougher. I think this is about soil, and soil. You got to have really good woodsy, composty, woodland soil, I think, to grow Fritillarias properly. They got to have good drainage and a nice spot to grow in the yard. You can grow them. I see them all over the place. It's just one that personally I have not had the best of luck with. Lots of different ones around. Certainly the checkered. This is the most impressive of the flowers. You're going to get big, tall stalks, orange, yellows, and it is a very cool plant, but really watch the drainage. I would add a lot of extra compost or even a smaller bark in my mixture there to make sure that it's a little more kind of woodsy woodland area, and I think you'll be fine. Galanthus or snowdrops, a couple that we'll do here right now. You know, these would be up pretty early, you know, kind of with our aconites and crocus. You know, a lot of these you see in botanical gardens and photographs, different yards certainly around I see with a lot of these. That's one that, again, a mass of these is going to make an unbelievable presentation. I'm not just looking to put 5 in here and 5 in there. I got a little spot that I like in the shade or part shade that I want a mass of spring color. That's a great bulb for what we call naturalizing, you know, something and not have to mess with very much and have them come back reliably year. It's one of those that's probably one person's trash, another one's treasure. They're awful pretty when they flower. Got great blue color. But that's one that will tend to multiply over and keep going and going and going. And again, if you've got room, you've got a nice little kind of shady garden, and you want something that naturalizes very well, Scilla is hard to beat, but it is one you will get a bunch. Squill or Puschkinia, a little bit similar to our last slide, but this one I would have a little bit more intricate flowers. So a little bit of blue striping on the white. Glory of the Snow, another really early one. If you like the blues, that's got an awful pretty flower. That's another easy one to grow that will naturalize very well. That's another one we'd have around. And then Spring Star Flower, another blue, kind of shorter one. Very easy to grow if I've got that shade, part shade. Easy way to do it. Snowflakes, a little bit like the snowdrops. You can see maybe a little bit more intricate flower. That's a real pretty bloom with a little touch of the lime green on the tip of the petals. Give me a little bit of fragrance. And again, a really easy one to naturalize if I want to have a little bit of shade color in the white. There's our allium. So that's actually the same allium that I popped in the middle of that container here a few moments ago. I can get other colors. I've got some in my garden. There's one called Fireworks. My boys love to hit with their wiffle ball bat. Looks like a monster basketball with looks like literally a firework or a Sputnik satellite. There's some pretty large alliums. If you can find some pretty cool varieties. That's a little bit smaller, you know, maybe baseball sized purple one that I planted, but I can get quite large alliums if you're into cool bulbs. You know, it's in the onion family, so sometimes you plant them and you're like, what am I planting, an onion or an allium? But it does have a very cool flower. There's a different style. The Christophei's got kind of that fireworks pattern. That's the one I do in my butterfly garden. That does look pretty cool, even when they're not really blooming. You know, the structure over the summer is pretty different, kind of a fun little texture to add to the garden. Some more early iris. I've still got a few of these. This is one of the first ones I put in my place probably 20 years ago. I had a couple little patches going, and I've still got them after all these years. Maybe not quite as many. I think the squirrels have taken a couple. But reticulata iris, little short guy. You know, I want a little, again, blooming in the snow. I don't care how cold it is. Just a little 4 to 6 inch mini iris. You can get a few different colors. You can see that I can plant more in the sun and have something very short for that kind of midwinter, a little bit of flower power. Muscari is one of my squirrels' favorites. I will tell you right now, the one that resides in my neighborhood in Everett. But Muscari is another one. If you buy a pack of those, you're probably buying 10 packs because that's one that will multiply, take up some room, and naturalize very well. I've used those kind of on native areas. You know, I've got 2 banks along my place in Everett that is technically the city property, but instead of letting the grass grow on the blackberries, I'd throw wildflowers out. And a lot of times, years ago, I started throwing Muscari bulbs here and there on the bank, and they're kind of fun. They pop up here coming out of winter and typically bloom in that, you know, late February, March, you know, time frame for a little bit of flower power. Cyclamen is a plant I put in here because it's something you can find right now with bulbs. You can hardly find it usually in spring. It's perfect. It doesn't really grow from a bulb. It's what they call it, a coum. But we have a lot of plants around right now. It's a tough one to find in just the dry bulb forms on occasion, but it's a very easy plant to purchase in the fall. They're blooming right now. You know, Cyclamen's got spectacular foliage. They bloom fall into the winter, and they go dormant in the summer. And then you'll see it again that next fall as we start to get rain and cool off again. If you've got shady, part shady, looking for a very low, little filler plant, you can see they've got great texture on the foliage too, with the silvers and the greens. And you can typically find, whites, a range of pinks, sometimes even red for the flowers. There's the other one, the heterofolium, that kind of looks a little bit like ivy foliage. And you can see the cool's got a little more silver with more of a round foliage. Tulips, we'll go through just a few. I'll whip through the slides here because I think everybody knows tulips. Again, I would go back to the beginning when I said, read your package. What season do you want to have tulips? How tall do you want them to get? Do you want singles, doubles? Do you want to clip them? All the tulips make great cut flowers. I kind of chuckle, if I buy a bag of tulips here, you get discount with a class. There's $15 for 15 tulips. Not to make fun of the flower shops, but I bet you I would go down and pay more than $15 for 15 tulips, buying them at a flower shop for a bouquet. So even if I just want to cut them and bring them in for a little spring vase, it's an easy way to do the tulips. So lots of different ones. You'll see double earlies. There's a couple of varieties you can kind of choose from. Some really nice, sometimes fragrance on these too. Make sure you read your package because they'll tell you right on there. Fragrant, if it's a variety that's got scent. Single early tulips, just starting to open. A couple of varieties of those. Foster tulips, I think that's a great one. It's got kind of a nice white, stark white flower, but look at the foliage on that one. If you want a little bit of added interest with the foliage, there's a few varieties that have some intense variegation in the leaves. Triumph tulips, just a little bit bigger, a little bit later blooming. You can see a couple of varieties of those. I just saw today we still have some sun catchers. That's my flower there, my colors. Darwin hybrids are some classic tulips. You'll see again, wide range of colors, yellows, pinks, purples, reds, whites. You can pretty much find anything. Sometimes we get into the double lates. We up the fragrance a little bit. Angelique is one of my all-time favorites. If you like pastel pink, that's got great smell and a great one to bring in as a cut flower as well. And a couple other tulips just kind of worth mentioning. You can find some really fun flowers. Look at the picture of the fringe tulips. Those are awfully cool. Lily flowering tulips will have that curved petal out, kind of like a lily would. Parrot tulips look like parrot feathers, some really fun colors you'll see on those. And if you like the lime green, I love the contrast of that Viridiflora. That's got the lime green with the whites and the pastel. You can find a few varieties of those as well. Gregii, I have these in low areas. That's an orange one. I've got some red as well in my yard. Again, look at the foliage. I've got some nice spotting with some red on kind of a blue-green. It's got attractive foliage, nice short growth habit. And that's another one for a tulip, at least, that I would say is great for naturalizing. Again, I want those year after year after year versus just the one big display. Daffodils, lots of different daffodils or Narcissus around. Again, lots of them fragrant, some of them not. We got short, we got tall. Read your packages. You can find any color combination you like in the whites and yellows and oranges and peaches and pinky colors. Depending on what you like for your yard. So watch the packages for the heights, the season, and again, try to plant them in mass. A bunch of daffodils together is going to make a great presentation. So some of the shorter ones that I really like, well, these are actually mediums. Dutch Master is your classic yellow daffodil. I think you used to call them King Alfred's, the same idea. That would be, to me, would be a classic white. We've got Mount Hood, if I want to do something in the white range, a little bit brighter. And a Keto over there, if you're like me and you like a little orange. Now I can have my yellow corolla or orange corolla on the yellow petals. A couple really short ones. And these are a lot of the ones I have in my yard because I think they naturalize very well. Again, I don't want something tall. I want something short. Some of them like fragrance again. But tete-a-tats is a common one you'll see everywhere. We saw a lot of those in spring, grown and bloomed as well. Bright yellow, Jetfire adds the orange. Jack Snipe is going to have a little bit of the white with the yellow on it, just a little bit different color. Okay. Getting up with a little larger cup, Ice Follies gives me the white yellow. Professor Einstein again gives me the white with the orange. I want a little bit more height, but something that still I don't have to stake or do anything to hold it up, but gives me just a little bit more height on some of those larger cup types. There's the pink. We got Skypes, got a little touch of pink. That Avalon's awful pretty. If I don't think we might be out of that one already, but that's one you can still probably find around. Split Corona is a little different texture. You can see almost that semi-double center or cup in the middle of it. And then we got little doubles there. You know, if I want to have a little fuller flower, again, I can cut these, bring them inside, grow them on the landscape, grow them just about anywhere. Some of these will be some of your more fragrant ones. Pheasant's Eye's got an excellent fragrance, Merlin. And then the jonquils, you know, a lot of these are like the tete-a-tetes a little bit, some different colors, but they'll tend to be a mix. You know, if I was going to buy that, you know, again, there's a little collection of those, 20 of them. I'm going to have a nice variation of color, some just a little bit shorter, a little bit taller. They're not all going to be the same, you know, 18 inches tall. I'd have 12-inch, 14, 16, some different heights in there to kind of mix it up a little bit. Those have got some great names. Pippet, isn't that a fun name to say? Just say Pippet 10 times. And there you go. You know, that's kind of a few of the faves. You know, there's a lot of bulbs out there. We've got a pretty good selection here at Sunnyside every year. I'll kind of smile as I say, everybody knows how interesting this year has been. The nursery business has been incredible, which is great for us. And it's great that a lot of people are staying home and gardening and staying safe and kind of getting back into their yards. I am shocked how many bulbs have sold out of here, to be frank, already. Typically, we have this class, and this is where we start to sell bulbs. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time. We still got some great choices down here, but we don't have probably as much as we usually would have this time of year because it has been so busy. Certainly come down and take a look at what we have. We'll have a little sale I'll tell you about here in a second. But, you know, look around. You know, we'll have a great selection again next fall if you don't get all the ones you want. And a lot of these you can find sometimes on the internet. I hate to say there's a lot of good mail order bulb places if they're reputable. It's something we're out of that you really wanted to try. You know, take a look and see what you can find around because there might be some options there as well. Okay. So real quick, I'm going to stop this. There we go. Just to tell you a couple things, the class discount, like we always do for the classes, starting today, if you come down, it just started to rain a little bit, but it won't rain all day. And we got some sunshine coming again this week. You know, come down, do some shopping, tell us you were at the class. You got 20% off all the bulbs here. I'll throw the cashiers under the bus here for a minute and tell you if you want bulb planters, tell them Trevor said it was okay and they'll call me and I'll come approve it. You can have 20% off our little bulb planters as well. We have some of those to make life a little easier as you're planting them. If you want to join us next week, on Saturday, I'll be teaching a class on putting the garden to bed, going through some basic things to kind of do with the fall as we get towards winter. And in 2 weeks, on the 24th, will be conifer class. We'll be talking everything evergreen. So you can kind of rediscover your evergreen state, as we say here in Washington, and find some fun dwarf, medium, and upright conifers to choose from. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole here, and we'll do some questions if we can.
If you have to head out and you can't hang around, we do record all these classes and we post them up on our website. They're up on our classes page on our website. It'll be up either later today or tomorrow, so you can go back and watch it if you have to head out. So some of the tools that you talked about in the beginning, Trevor, are those suitable for rocky soils, or do you need to plant a different way?
Well, if we have really rocky soil, I'll be honest, this is not going to do you a whole lot of good. A bulb planter is going to have a tougher time getting down through a lot of rocks. I would really look at the auger. You know, this is something I can put on my power drill. And yes, you will probably bring up, we call them Easter eggs at our house. You will bring up lots of Easter eggs out of the soil that you can move to another location. But the auger is a great way to go if you want to save some struggle with the planter or a regular trowel. and get through some decent roots as well as some larger rocks. Certainly if you've got one this large, it is not going to break it in half. At least you can find it, perhaps get around the edge of it and get it out of your way so you can get the planting done.
So you mentioned fertilizer while you're planting, but when do you need to reapply that? How do you go about that?
Well, you know, always put food in when you pop them in the ground, because that'll be your first start. But as I mentioned earlier, I would always go back and feed, especially that first season, feed coming out of winter. So when I'm out there in that March time frame, say, or February, maybe on some of the earlier crocus, I would broadcast out a little bit of fertilizer as those are coming out of the soil. That has a chance to wash in and get to the root system. So as it blooms from last year's energy, now I've got fertilizer ready to go for a foliage flush and to get my bulb larger. So I probably have 3 times the flower that second season. So when you plant them, feed them coming out of winter, and then I would get on a once a year feeding schedule. If you want me, just you know, doing that again in a February, March time frame to keep them happy year after year.
How long do these bulbs last?
Bulbs could last forever. You know, there's a lot of reasons why they may not come back, but as we kind of started with, if I've got good drainage, I keep Mr. Squirrel from borrowing some. You know, that's 2 phases. You know, I'm going to be honest, the tulip side of it is a little bit harder. I think if you buy daffodil, crocus, hyacinth, all the rest of the stuff I've talked about today, I don't think you're going to have any issue. If you've got good drainage, you feed them, you do it properly, you're going to have them forever. Tulips to me is a little bit more of a crapshoot. I brought in 1 bag of what we call species tulips. Okay, these are shorter things, and it says right on that package to me, great for establishing, naturalizing, something like that. I've planted those going back 20 years, and I have more and more every year, and I've never lost any. If I go buy a typical hybrid tulip, okay, I've got to be a little bit more careful about the squirrel, for one. He's borrowed my orange ones every year when I plant them. And 2, I would be a little more cautious about the wet winter. Yes, I'm going to get a great flower display of that next season, but I don't know, a lot of the fancy hybrids will come back year after year after year unless you're very careful with the food, the drainage, and the care. Don't ever cut them off until they go brown or dormant on their own. The daffodils, sometimes you can get away with that, but not the tulips. I want to make sure those stay in the ground and are happy. But good sunny locations, drainage, feeding, yes, you could feasibly have tulips back year after year. I've talked to many gardeners over my life that frankly plant the tulips, treat them as an annual, or plant the tulips, enjoy the flower, let them go dormant, dig them up, store them in a bag in the garage, and then replant them in the fall. You're fine doing that as well.
What about anemones? Do they usually do pretty well in terms of long lasting?
Yeah, and just, you know, anemones are a great one. I should have probably put that on my slideshow too. There's great spring anemones, and then you've got summer anemones. You know, right now we're a season ahead again doing spring bulbs. When we do this class in April, we will be talking about summer anemones, dahlias, lilies, all the things that we would bloom in the summer.
If you have poor drainage, do you have any tips on how to do that? Somebody asked about, you know, maybe putting rocks or something in the bottom of your containers, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in containers, I would never do rock anymore. It actually causes some more surface tension, and the water doesn't, believe it or not, get out quite as fast. A good well-drained potting soil is the way to go, always in containers. In the ground, you know, breaking up that clay layer, amending the soil with compost, all that stuff will help. But if you're worried about drainage, you know, I would dig down till I got a hard pan, try to break through that, amend some compost. I'm no different than you guys. I've got hard pan in my yard too. Dig some compost in there. Go get the hose and dump a bunch of water in that hole. Is it sitting there and collecting, or is it moving down through the soil structure? As long as I've got it draining through there, I'd be okay.
And you mentioned critters. Are there any bulbs that they don't like, or should you always use that repels all?
No, there's plenty of things. Again, if I look at that package, if I look right on this package of Narcissus, if you read the text here, which probably is too small to see, I'll show you. It says fragrant rock garden, deer and critter resistant. The deer don't touch daffodils. Yes, they will clip on tulips a little bit, but they won't touch the daffodils, and frankly, the squirrels don't either. I've never had a squirrel dig up anything in my yard in the daffodil narcissus side of it. Crocus, yes. Tulips, yes. Not much else besides that for the squirrel, but the deer won't also touch the narcissus.
What's the latest you can plant your spring blooming bulbs?
Well, I'll smile as I say this because I've forgotten I had bulbs in my garage many times over the years, and I've walked out in like Christmas time and said, holy smokes, I forgot to put those in the ground. And I go ahead and do it, and they grow. I've seen bulbs in my own possession that have that much green coming out of them in a dusty garage that I forgot about, but I still put in the ground, and they're okay. Leaving them till next February, probably not going to work out so swell, but as long as we get them in here going into winter, in my experience, what happens is if, maybe I forgot my attentates and in my yard, they bloom in February, I forgot to put them in and I don't get to it till Christmas, I just extend the bloom a little bit later that first season, and then they get acclimated and I'm okay.
Somebody asked about winter blooming iris. Is that something that does well in our area up here?
Well, I think they probably mean that little iris reticulata that I actually had a slide of in there. That's the snow iris, I've seen it called. There's a bunch of names for it. Iris does very well. Again, as long as I've got drainage, this is, I showed one type of iris. There's all kinds of other spring irises that we could throw in. So Siberian, Japanese iris, bearded iris. I mean, there's a whole, iris could almost be its own class. There's a lot of good iris we can grow in the Northwest for sure.
That container demo that you planted up so we could see, can you also put, established plants on top of it now so that you've got color on top of those bulbs, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bulbs will push through some gentle foliage. I volunteer as president of our arboretum down in Everett here. And what we've done in our main planter area, the pansies just went back in. I've got over 300 of those King Alfred or daffodils planted in that planter we've had for a number of years. We go in and plant summer annuals on top of it after the daffodils are done. And this time of year, about a week ago, the volunteers came down and we planted 200 pansies on top of it. We will have that color all season through the winter for flowers. And then come springtime, here come the daffodils up right through it as well. You don't want to, do sedums or something with a very thick root mass, ground covers, things like that. They'll have a tougher time getting through. But as long as it's pansies and little specimens, those bulbs will find their way.
So what do you do once your bulbs are done blooming, for instance, to hide some of the, less than stellar foliage, or, do you just leave them until the next season? What if you want to plant stuff on top? How do you handle?
This is the tough one for me because, again, I like tidy in my own yard, so it's a tough one for me. You cannot cut the green foliage off. So, yes, you can go and deadhead them when the flowers are done, which is what OCD guy usually does. But I have to leave that green alone because until it goes yellow, brown, it is still storing energy for the next season flower. If I go out and lop them off after bloom, you're not going to have the flower season that you would want as a gardener.
So being self-proclaimed OCD, how do you, somebody asked, how do you keep track if you want to put more bulbs, say, summer blooming bulbs on top of your spring ones? Do you have any tips on how to keep track of where things are and not, piling?
My memory's pretty good still. I'm not quite 50, so I remember where most of mine are. But I'll tell you what I do every year, because I always inevitably add another patch of this or replenish that. Is I get bamboo stakes, cheap bamboo stakes, and I cut them into like little foot chunks. And when I plant a patch, I take stakes and I kind of put a little 4 or 5 of them in a round to kind of roughly mark the area. I figure in my own bald head, if I see that 3 or 4 times here as I'm working through the winter, I won't forget that's where I put them. It doesn't mean that I never do, but and again, I mentioned mulching. I always compost whenever I plant anything, period. And it's real easy to see in your yard if you went out right now, planted 20 daffodils, had a patch of them, put fresh mulch on it, that's going to stick out like a sore thumb, at least for the first year. And you'll say, oh yeah, I see that fresh soil there. That's right where I put some more bulbs down. You know, popsicle sticks, tags. I mean, I could go on and on where you could mark the area, but I think that might be the best thing to try.
So can you address watering specifically in containers? How do you handle watering? Do you need any sort of like irrigation specifically in containers?
Bulbs aren't heavy drinkers. I'll speak for us right here as the rain's coming down on the greenhouse roof above me. We have plenty of rain in the spring in Washington. I have never had to walk out and water my bulb container in March, in April, yes, in May. Just like any other annual container, if we had 3, 4, 5 days in a row, sometimes we get nice weather in May, it warms up a little bit. Yes, I'll just go water it like I would any other container. But as long as that pot is sitting out where it's getting rain all winter and not underneath an eave or underneath it, something else, a deck or whatever, where it's going to dry out, that is not good. We don't want to freeze dry things. But as long as it's out where it's getting rain, and you stick with spring stuff, I don't think you're going to have to water it much. Maybe after the flower, as we get into the, again, the May time frame, depending on what the weather does, a little bit, but never probably more than once a week, kind of thing. I should mention too, with my container, I don't take that bulb container home and just go take it to the compost heap in the sky and dump all that stuff. I'm not into wasting my money. So I will look at what I put in there and say, yes, I want those. Yes, I want this. And after that pot goes dormant, that exact pot at my house turns into a big purple salvia for the hummingbirds with million bills out of it all summer through fall. I just took that out a few nights ago to put the bulbs in for next year. So I will try to recycle these things as we go through. I can guarantee you next year I will pull those daffodils out when they're done, the crocus, maybe not the tulips, to be honest with you. And I will take that stuff and go, okay, I'm going to go put those in my yard somewhere and let them grow that way going forward.
Do you have to take them out, or can you leave them in the container for the next
season? Leave in the pot too. I'll be honest, last year at the class, when we did this live here, I probably put 3 times that many bulbs in my pot. And I think I freaked some people out here like, holy smokes, how many? And it was packed. I mean, it was spectacular for my place. That would not have lasted for another year, I can tell you. I put too many in there, but it was just for a season. I wanted flower to come home to. In this case, yeah, I put 5 and 10. There is all kinds of room in there. I would feed it, just like we talked about coming out of winter. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to feed it for sure one time at least. I could save that in the container. Yes, it's going to go dormant. Yes, it'll be dirt, by June, but I could just take that pot, go shove it out behind the house somewhere. Don't let it desiccate and get bone dry, or I may lose the bulbs. I don't have to go water it every day, like something growing, but I'd check it probably once a week, keep a little bit of moisture in it, and then boom, I'd have it ready to go for next year as well.
Can you do a brief synopsis of the naturalizing? The internet glitched when you were talking about it, so can you give us a brief?
Well, again, I want flower power in certain spots on my door. In other places, I just want to pop an orange tulips. I don't mind spending $8-10 to have a big clump of tulips. I get to enjoy the flower. If they come back great. If you don't, oh well, I'm not going to be mad at you, kind of thing. But if I want something I can have for my garden for years, I want that naturalizing tag on there, something that establishes and naturalizes very well, because I can put 10 in. I can tell you with me, with Hesitates, put 10 in 15 years ago. I've got 40 of them now. They've divided, they've spread. I've got more, and I get more flower every year. If it has that on the tag, that's a way that's to let maybe not that it's easier to grow or harder to grow. It's not that, but it's something, if I put it in a good location, I feed it, I've got drainage, all the things we talked about, I will have that patch of bulbs forever. Essentially, if the squirrel doesn't take it, I will have it there forever.
Somebody just asked about peonies. Can you put bulbs around or near peonies? Are they friends?
Yeah, that's fine. Peonies, honestly, is going to grow from a kind of bulb, to be honest with you. You can buy a lot of times bare root peonies. We're going to plant a bunch here this year for us. But as long as I stay away from that root mass, give myself a little bit of room out for the bulb to have some space to grow. Absolutely. I've got one of my Ethiopian in the backyard is the one I mentioned. I have that Greggii tulip, the little short one with the spotted leaves. I've got those all around that Ethos. So those bloom out, get color, then my peony comes up and finishes off the show.
We just got a question about if you cut the blooms to use, you know, in a bouquet in your house or whatever, will they regrow the bulbs again? I mean, does it affect it at all if you use them for cut flowers?
No, not at all. I mean, essentially you're not harvesting the leaves, you're just cutting that stem. So you're doing just like a floral does. I want to have the flower come in and bud stage, enjoy color. I mean, tulips will last a week or two in a nice vase inside. But I leave the leaves alone because that way that leaf is sitting there building energy, increasing my bulb size, and then I've got the flower again for that next season.
I think we've gotten most of the questions. We're about out of time. If you think of anything else that you'd like to have answers to, please don't be afraid to reach out to us by phone or email. You can reach us at sunnyside@msn.com. Come in, talk to us. We're happy to help with design tips if there's certain bulbs you like. You know, we'd love to chat with you and kind of do a one-on-one dialogue with any questions or issues you have, whatever that may be. This is recorded again. I posted it a few times in the chat, so you can look at it up on our classes page up on our website. It'll be up either later today or tomorrow, and the handouts up there as well. We really appreciate everybody joining us, and we hope to see you for the next class.
Thank you.